Team 2022, let's hit it correctly. A lot of you are very interested in the Bowhunters challenge that we have going on right now. And I say a lot of you are interested because there is currently a sale going on with the Bowhunters challenge. So for y'all who remember, I actually started this program about a year ago. So when I record this, it's actually the 3rd of January. So it's almost a year ago to the date that I pretty much put my feelers out to launch this. However, a year on, all of the content is recorded. We've had multiple guys go through the program and do incredibly well on the program. And this year, my goal is to actually just help a fair few people with it at the start of the year. January is always when people are most motivated. So what I'm going to do is for the whole of January is chuck a sale on this one, of $300 off with the code JAN2022. That's Jan, all in capitals, JAN 2022. If you enter that code in, you will get $300 off of the Bowhunters challenge. So please join me on that. It's not something that is going to stick around. It's literally here for January and January only. Outside of that, I've got a big year kind of planned with the second child on the way. I've got a fair few things up my sleeve that are going on with my other businesses as well. And so realistically, I think in the foreseeable future, when I look at it, this is pretty much the only time I'm going to be running this as a cohort this year. You are actually able to sign up to the program at any point. However, you won't get $300 off and you won't get to go through it with a group of other like-minded bow hunting badasses. So if that is something that is interesting to you, if you wanted to go through, the program has 12 weeks of nutrition designed for you. It's got 12 weeks of training programs designed to you. A lot of what I do in the program is actually help you to build strength for your upper body. A lot of it is around pretty much bulletproofing your shoulders to make sure you have no issues when you are out drawing your bow. So drawing back on the bow, making sure you have no issues with pulling it back, making sure you've got no issues with holding it, making sure that you have no injuries whatsoever, but also with stamina. Stamina out in the field is a massive thing, and the program really helps you to build on that. So that is kind of the major two parts of it, but there's actually like a whole program design, a whole online system where you get to log in. There's content for each week. So there was a weekly call that I conducted to start with, and so you'll get access to those weekly calls. And essentially what that does is help you to layer in some awesome foundations to help you to really build an incredible healthy lifestyle, essentially. And then on top of that, I also give you access to over 200 plus recipes to utilize whilst you're going through the program, as well as what I already give you with your meal plans that I create for you from scratch. So they are personalized, they're designed for you. It's not just an off the shelf program. This is really a well thought out program that has a lot of content and pretty much sets you up for complete success. So once again, if you would like to get involved with that program for January of 2022, we are doing a sale for $300 off. All you need to do is go to bowhunterschallenge.com and enter in the code JAN2022, and that is on the upfront payment only, on that option only, on the upfront payment option only. Once again, the code is JAN2022.
Hey there, and welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. I'm your host, Matty, and join me and our guests as we take the quality of meat back into our own hands, searching the wild for free-ranged animals to harvest as ethically as we can. I interview a variety of specialists from the bow hunting community to help fast-track your journey as a bow hunter. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this chinwag on one of your favorite topics in the world, bow hunting.
Guys, welcome to Becoming a Bowhunter. This is an interesting episode because it is January 2022, the 3rd of January to be exact. But what I'm actually doing is recording a recall on one of my last hunts. And so I've got notes here. I'm going to get straight into it, just to get you right into the thick of it all, because the last podcast you would have heard was me driving to the actual property with the excitement of that all happening. And so this is kind of like the recap as to what actually happened. So If you recall, I hopped up and left by 3 a.m. I was driving to the property. I was told by Clark that there was going to be other guys there and that I had to be there by no later than 5:30. So by leaving at 3 o'clock, I got there, I think, at about maybe 5:05, 10 past 5, something around that time. When I got there, Clark was already up. He was working on his little buggy. He's got a Yamaha buggy that has been giving him grief. And so he was changing the sensor on it when I got there. So I just jumped in and started helping him straight away with that. Had to pretty much pull apart 100 different panels to kind of get it up and pull it apart to make sure that we could put this little sensor in. And then when we put it all back together, we were going to drive it down to where we were going. However, we were still waiting on other people to rock up, and they actually never came. So what we did is we left a note for them. He's got a big whiteboard there, so left a note for them, and pretty much we got on our way, got in the Yamaha and started driving. And unfortunately, the sensor did not fix a thing. I think I haven't actually talked to him since, but I think it's probably because he didn't run, rewire the computer system or whatever, like plug it in to kind of override any of the issues that were going on before. However, I will let you know maybe down track if that is a thing. Maybe I won't. But anyway, we hopped in, we started driving, and it was still just putting along. It's like it's an idle. And we drove all of 5-10 minutes down the road, and unfortunately the thing started overheating again. So we got to kind of as far as we wanted to, and we pulled up anyway. But yeah, I was pretty excited because it meant that I was going out with Clark by myself for the morning. And so I don't know if you don't know who I'm talking about, it's Clark McGee. The system that I've got involved with is Ridge Group or Wild Country. It's kind of like a mixture of it all. And he runs a block called Glenfiddich. Glenfiddich. And on Glenfiddich, essentially what happens is you pay a membership for the year, and then you pay per animal that you take. Now, the biggest thing about this is that it's like kind of a whole deer management service, or deer management system. And essentially what he's got is, I think 5 or 6 neighbouring blocks that he has access to, and he's got essentially the rights for the pest control, as you would call it. What that means is that he and the group of hunters that he has go on there do all of the hunting of the animals. And so that's the way that it works. And essentially the way the system works is that you're not only managing what deer get shot at what time of year, but you're also paying for those animals, which then goes back into the landowners. So they're actually getting a fair chunk for having people on their system. And it all actually, the way the licensing and insurance works, I'm pretty sure is that it will fall back on Clark. And I'll get him to confirm that when we actually do a full podcast together. But what that means is that the landowner doesn't have as much of a worry as letting just any old hunter on their system, because if essentially, and I've heard of this a few times, is that if someone was to get injured whilst on a property, it falls back on the landowner, and so whatever system they're using for insurance, it would fall straight back on them. And a lot of the time it results in, if that person needs medical care, especially ongoing medical care, that the property gets sold, or chunks of the property get sold, to be able to afford to pay for that person's care and ongoing payouts. It's just the way that the insurance systems work. So by having something like this set in place, it means that the public liability, I think, would take over instead. Now, I'm not definite on that, so it's kind of that's my understanding. It might not be 100% correct. Anyway, so going out with Clark, and Clark has a wealth of knowledge. He's spent literally his whole life in the bush. And so I'm kind of lapping up every moment that I get to go out with him. And it is a bit far and few between, because what happens is you go out there and there might be 6 different hunters all on the same block at the one time. And so he needs to manage where each hunter is going for the afternoon. Quite often he'll drive someone out and kind of leave them in a block or walk around with them. And then the other hunters go off into different blocks. Now, obviously you're managing firearms. You're also managing with some bow hunters, and so it's trying to work out exactly where everyone's going to go to be safe, making sure that we're not kind of stamping over the same places we've already been, and just scenting it all up. So I get there and it's only me and him, which is awesome. It's been a week since anyone's been there, which means that I get to kind of have fresh stomping grounds, and we kind of get to go out and chase whatever we wanted. However, what you're allowed to chase at this time of year, so this being December once again, is when they start to put some blocks on which deer can actually be hunted. And I think it's obviously a great system. It's obviously why things work so well and why they've got such good genetics out there. But at the same time, and you'll probably hear me talk about it in a sense of disappointment over this podcast, because I say disappointment, but what I actually mean is that I achieved so much on this weekend. It's just that I had so many opportunities that were not able to be taken because of the deer management service. And I 100% respect that, because it's the system that I've bought into. And so it was just a very interesting play out of how the weekend worked. And you'll hear about that as we go. So at the moment, you're able to shoot yearling hinds, so a female red deer that is a year old, or you're able to shoot the cull stags. So a cull stag mainly being told based on genetics. And so when you look at the genetics of a stag, this is based off of how their antlers are growing. This is all during velvet. So it's an interesting time, because obviously their antlers are still growing when they're in velvet. But it's just far enough along that you should be able to, they should have pretty much kind of their racks growing pretty well. And if they don't, then there's a fair chance that they've got some form of bad genetics. So bad genetics would be an animal that doesn't have their brow, bay, and tray tines on both sides. So some of them you might see, for instance, if you saw a fork on one side, but then you saw kind of three tines or four tines on the other side, that would be a fair sign that, hey, that is a cull stag. And a lot of the times he is obviously with the people that are shooting them, so he's also able to give you a bit more insights into them. I think a better example would be if there was, I think that's a pretty good example, right? Like a fork on one side, so two tines on one side, and maybe a brow and a straight stick at the top, and then you've got two or three tines off the other side, which says, hey, he's had his chance to start growing them. He hasn't grown them. So there's a fair chance that he is, his genetics are not as good as what they could be. Now, what this obviously does is when you're taking out the cull stags, is that it means that come the rut, when they actually start mating, is that it's passing on good genetics and good genetics only. We're not getting these cull stags or these mong heads, whatever you want to call them, going through the system and spreading their genetics of bad antler heads, essentially. So it does make it quite hard for when you're going up for a meat hunt. And so we get there and we're walking, and we took one of the dogs out, and it's so cool to watch his dogs. They literally sit right on his heels. So he'll be walking and they'll be directly right behind him. As he takes a step, they step forward and move with him. And you can constantly just see their noses going, nose up in the air, just sniffing along as they go. And it's just, I think it's just super cool to kind of watch, and interesting to see how well he's really trained his dogs. And I did talk to him about that once, and maybe it's something I'll bring up with him when I get him on the podcast. But he's constantly walking with the dogs behind him, and then they'll prep up and kind of walk out in front a bit more if there's a smell that they kind of get interested by. And so we're walking, wind directly in our face. We're walking along kind of a few different, sidings, some ridges essentially, and we're walking around, and we get to this part where there's a little gully crossing, and Clark said to me, during this time, the hinds, and why the hinds are off limits during this time, is because they're fawning. And so essentially all of the pregnant hinds from April this year, from April 2021, are dropping their fawns in December 2021. And so what that means is that if you're shooting all of the hinds, that you're not getting the new blood coming through, which is obviously not a good thing. So that's why they're off limits. So we're walking into this gully, and he says to me, you know what, when a hind is about to drop her fawn, what she'll do is to go into a big thick country like this. Very cool. And there'd been a fair bit of water around anyway, so it's like there's a fair bit of water, so she really doesn't have to do much. If she wants to travel, she can literally hop up, go for a walk, have a graze, have a drink, and go back to her fawn right there and there, without having to worry about it too much. And it was just like thick lantana, thick kind of coverage right in this gully it wasn't such a creek as such. If there was running water, potentially it would have been, but it was just like a damp, shaded area. And yeah, it was just interesting to kind of hear that part. And as we started walking around and we got the wind in our face, sure enough, this hind jumps up, runs straight out of where he literally had pointed, pretty much, and we just wouldn't have seen it based on how thick the cover was. So it just kind of gives you a little bit of insight as to what they do and how they bed down in that thick stuff, like real thick stuff. Like literally, it was just. Yeah, she would have been pretty much crawling underneath stuff to get in there, or going right underneath the lantana bushes when you see the big holes in the lantana bushes, and they're going through that. That's pretty much what she was in. But yeah, I thought that was just super interesting. He literally picked it. And something he said to me, and this is a thing that it's interesting. It's kind of how I think I hunt anyway, but this just kind of gave me confirmation that what I was doing was correct. And he said to me is hunt fast until you see sign, and then you slow down. And he said usually depending on the sign, so because it had just had a fair bit of rain, you could literally see the deer prints. It actually rained overnight, so you could see deer prints based on if they'd been moving that morning. He said, if you see deer prints, typically they'll be within a 150 meter radius roughly as to where you are. Now, that's not always the case, but he said like 80% of the time, that's usually what he finds. Once he walks fast on a morning like that where you can see fresh sign, when he sees the fresh sign, he really slows down and really starts to take a lot more notice. So we're constantly walking along game trails, constantly looking on the floor to see what we can see if we're seeing fresh poo, seeing if we can see fresh tracks based on the dirt that's been moved, and so that's kind of been something that I've really always tried to do anyways. I usually hunt quite fast, and I've had people talk to me like, wow, you're actually quite an aggressive hunter when I go out with them, but at the same time I've also gone out at other times and just gone way too slow and not seen a thing, and not covered half of the ground that I've got access to cover, and therefore just not really seeing what's about and not really discovered my land. So going onto a new block like this, that was kind of my method. And it's not like I'm out there sprinting, like you're moving fast with stealth. It's just not taking a step and then doing some glassing essentially, which might be completely different based on the game that you're hunting. So anyway, we're walking along, and it was literally only a couple hundred meters from where we were in that gully, and Clark turned back to talk to me and say something, and I missed what he actually said, and then he kept walking, but he had his head down, and sure enough, I think there was 4 heads pop up over the hill. They pop up, boom, 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 all just looking straight at us. I'm like, Clark, trying to get his attention, and I finally got him, and he's looking. He's like, oh Jesus, and at this point, they pretty much turn and run. And he said, mate, come here, and sat me pretty much right in front of this tree. He said, I'm going to call them back in. And this is pretty interesting to me because obviously the time that it was being December, I'm like, call? What do you mean call them back in? And so they've run down the hill a bit. One's run up the hill. He's like, load an arrow and get ready. And so I've loaded up, and pretty much he just starts doing these little fawn calls. So I'll give my best rendition. Hopefully there's no judgment from your judging ears. No, pretty much all it is I'll give you a little rundown. Meow, 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 meow. And so something similar to that. And essentially what he's saying is that it's a distressed fawn call, and they literally just came running in. They ran straight back at us, and they ran in because they hadn't got our wind yet. So they ran straight back at us and pulled up at probably about 40 meters. When they pulled up, Clark was saying something to me. I can't remember if he was saying not the one on the right or if he was saying the one on the left, but it was like too unclear for me to actually say. The shot was 40 meters. They were well aware of where I was, and all I had was pretty much full neck shot. So I was like, you know what, I'm not going to take that shot. I drew back and I was ready for it, but it wasn't a shot that I was comfortable with taking, because that's where you get injured animals running away. And essentially what he was saying is that the 2 on the left were good to shoot because they were both yearling hinds. However, the other ones were not, because they were full hinds. So pretty much that was just an opportunity that had kind of come and gone. And he just said, mate, what we'll do from here is he's going to peel back off, because obviously the buggy's kind of back up to the top of the hill and along the ridge as to where we've been. He's like, I'm going to peel back to the ridge, go back and see if the other guys have come yet, the other members had come out yet. to make sure that they know where they're going. And all I want you to do is keep hunting all the way around here. Eventually you'll end up back at the hut. So I'm like, yeah, perfect. And they use this system called Avenza Maps, and it works a treat. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. But pretty much I was like, perfect. So I just kept walking along this ridgeline, knowing that there was deer about. And I'm kind of constantly, I'm on a ridge, but looking down into a gully or into this creek. And so I'm walking along the creek, and same thing pretty much happened about maybe, I reckon it must have been like 5 minutes on from where we were, where there was a hind bedded down by herself in this thick creek. And pretty much I got to a part where the wind changed, and she just up and ran straight up, and then started honking a little hard out at me. And it really is, I love the sound of a honk. I really still really enjoy the sound of a honk, even though I know it means that I've stuffed up. It's just fascinating. I think anytime that you see deer out in the wild, it's just one of those, it's almost a sense of accomplishment just doing that, or just seeing that part and then hearing that part. But it's also, I guess, because it's such a unique sound, it's something you don't ever hear or see that often, especially not me living in Brizzy, that's for sure. And so anyway, I ended up continuing along this ridge, jumping into the next paddock and continuing through, and pretty much didn't see sign or see anything for the rest of the morning. I stayed reasonably high, looking down to the gullies the whole time. I got to a point, and to be honest, I was just a bit genuinely effed. It'd been a big week. I got to that point where the morning sun had kicked in. It was nice and hot, and I was just starting to crash and burn a little bit. So I stopped and had some food, and kind of hung out for a while, and then decided, you know what, I'm just going to make my way back up to camp. So I got up there and then made myself some breakfast. So that is pretty much the morning hunt. Just going to quickly check over my notes. Yeah, we're good to go. But yeah, it was literally like the next 2 to 3 hours I pretty much walked with no visuals. So I'm not talking about, like, I think we ended up going out by maybe 6:30. I think I got back to camp at 10:30. So there was a fair time that I was out there, just not seeing anything. So afternoon hunt that day. So by that time we had, the other guy had rocked up and pretty much set up camp and did all that stuff. Had just done the basics. I think there was another person who'd come out for their first day. Yeah, there definitely was. Who'd come out for their first day there. So essentially what happens is Clark vets you into the system to make sure that you're not a bad person, make sure that you're not going to go out and just do a cowboy job of shooting everything. And so he needs to vet people into the system. So there was someone who rocked up. So pretty much going through the formalities with them, talking to them a lot, and figuring out what we're going to do for the afternoon, having lunch, having breakfast, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, go out for that afternoon hunt. And it was, by this time, Rob, the other guy that was out there for the day, he had rocked up. And we'd worked out where we were going. They were going to drop me off. They drove completely around to this other space. And pretty much they dropped me there, and I started going my way through. And there's a place where I'd hunted before. And when I hunted there, I got put there the first 2 days I'd ever gone to this block. And essentially didn't see much sign at all. So I wasn't super stoked about being there, to be honest. I was like, nah. And obviously this is a fair while ago, so the deer do move. I understand that. So I just had to have my hopes high that there was going to be a fair bit of deer sign in there. Being that there'd been fresh rain, obviously I'd be able to see sign if it was out and about. So I started trekking my way through. And long story short, I decided, what they'd pretty much told me is to make my way around until I get to this dam and then make my way back up. And so I did that. I made my way around to the dam, and really there was not much sign at all as I walked through that space. There was old game trails, but nothing that had been used anytime soon. And so I made my way around all the way to this dam just to see if there'd been much going into the dam. But given that there was that much water out and about, there really just was no need for them to be going to the dam. So I was just kind of on this hill, and it was funny, the last time I was there, the guy who took me down into this dam block, into this part of the block, said there's always fallow up on this little nook, or he's seen them up there before. And so we when he took me there, we hunted it. We really snuck our way up quite slowly, and it was dry as a bone. There had not been anything there for a long time, no fresh sign, and so I was kind of like, oh, they've maybe moved on. Anyway, I was walking along this ridge just behind the dam, literally where this little nook is, and I look up, and the most radiant fallow deer is there, just orange with bright white spots, like bright orange, bright white spots, and she just stood out like, I don't know, she was like a sore thumb, right? She was just there and just glowing. I was like, wow, she is beautiful. And so pretty much because the does were off limits too, because same system. Okay, they're dropping their fawns around this time of year. So I had a little look, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go down and just see how close I can get, or go up and see how close I can get to her. And maybe get some photos and some footage or something like that. And so she's kind of going around this knob, the hill, like the top of this hill. It's like a rock formation up there, and she's making her way around it. I'm like, perfect. I'll start making my way over to her. She's probably maybe 200. I'd say probably 300 meters off of me. And so I'm in pretty long grass. I'm like, I'm just going to see what I can do here, see how I can make my way around. And so I start trekking up towards her, kind of constantly keeping eyes on where she was. By this point, literally within a minute of me seeing her, she had ducked out of my sight. So she'd gone around the rock formation. I could no longer see where she was. So I start making my way up towards her. I'm doing it stealthily, but still trekking through long grass, which is pretty noisy. And I'm walking towards her, and then I look up the hill, like directly up. So I'm on the ridge directly up from me, and there's a fallow head just watching me just as I walk along. Like, what the heck is that? And so she quickly runs off. I'm like, okay, well, trek up there, make sure that she's kind of out of the way before I go ahead over to the side and see this other one. So I make my way all the way up. She's literally, so she'd popped her head over a log. It's not like she was just standing out in the complete open. I'm not that bad a hunter, I swear. And so pretty much I made my way up over to this log, looked over into the valley, and she had trekked her way down into the thick stuff pretty quickly. So made my way up to where this really radiant fallow was, and you'd not believe how easily how well they camouflage in. It's absolutely bizarre. Like, for the color that she was and how much she actually stood out when I had clear view of her, it was crazy to think that as soon as she got around that rock formation, like, I just couldn't pick her. And I've walked out and I'm walking really slow. I'm looking, I'm kind of glassing, didn't glass enough. If I'm being honest, I was not glassy enough. I was probably moving a little too fast because I thought she'd maybe moved on a fair bit further down the hill. And she's just standing next to this rock, and boom, just took off. It was so bizarre. Like I said, like, just that your eyes don't pick up on that, and that she just blended into it so well. It was so interesting. But pretty much, I just thought that was super cool, just to see her in that sort of situation and have her that close. Not that I was ever going to get to actually hunt her, because I knew and understand that she was completely off limits, but it was just a cool situation to kind of have that. So the next morning, Rob, the guy who was there, and Clark and I all jump in the car and we all go for a drive. And essentially the plan is to drop me on a hill. I'm not going to talk too much about kind of lay of the land as such, like into the different blocks, but I guess I'll try to describe them as we go maybe. I'll just talk about the hunting, hey? So they're going to drop me pretty much, there's a hill on one side that overlooks the valley, and they're going to go onto the other hill on the other side of the valley. So we're all on this one hill. They're going to drop me on, they're driving me along. So when I talk about hill, I mean like multiple ridge lines joining into one big mountain, essentially. And so pretty much we get there, and Clark's like, look, there's usually stags that hang out on this block quite a lot, on this hill quite a lot. If you guys want to, let's park the car here. We'll walk down slowly. Leave your gear here, Matty, because it'll just be a shot for Rob if we get it, because he's a rifle hunter. So we just walk down slowly, and then he's like, okay, so what we'll do, Matty, is you stay here and walk along this ridge. We'll follow this ridge all the way down to pretty much where you can see us as we pop out. If there's anything, either of us will scare it into each other, and that would be perfect. So go back up, grab my bow, grab my gear, start walking down the hill, and there's nothing there. But they pop out down the bottom, and they peel off. They're going off to the right. I'm going back up the hill, essentially, but around the ridge a bit more. And so we're kind of hunting, mirroring each other, going along the side. And they're still in the truck. They're glassing quite a lot while they're in the car. Truck, ute, car, whatever you want to call it. And I was trekking my way around. I get to this part, which is pretty darn steep, and like steep into this creek that I have to cross over. or like a little runoff, I'd say, off of this ridge, and I had to get across it. So I'm trying to figure out what the best way was. I eventually find a game trail, like an old game trail, and make my way through. And there's this thick lantana, thick stuff all through there. And one of the things I've actually purchased since going to Glenfiddich is a pair of clippers, like bush clippers, because brush cutters, I guess you'd call them, type of thing. Like, because the first time I went out there, Dan, my cousin's husband, had said, look, this is one of the things that is very worthwhile out here, because so much of it is just thick lantana country. And so I actually went out with Clark on that hunt, and there's a video up online on his I think it's Clark McGee's Wild Country on YouTube, and there's a video of me and him going out and getting a pig as we walked down to this little gully, which was pretty cool. So yeah, if you want to check that out, you definitely can. But when I went out for that hunt with Clark, he had pulled out his snippers and just trimmed his way through this bush through this thick lantana to get down into this creek, and it's just so quiet and so stealthy. So I'm like, man, I got to get myself some of those. Anyway, so I got into this creek part and I needed them. So I chopped my way through. And as I got out the other side, I got kind of on top of this hill and I realized that I was missing an arrow. One of my arrows had got caught up in the lantana as I was going through. So I just dropped all my stuff, because I was like I was pretty much standing upright, grabbing onto like chunks of grass to climb up this hill. So I had to climb my way back down, but left all my gear up on top of the hill. And got back and found my arrow, and I was like, you know what? Part of me at first was like, oh, just leave it, and I was like, no way, that's like I think they're like $50 arrows pretty much. By the time you add up with your broadheads and stuff on there, it's pretty ridiculous. So I'm like, I'm not leaving one of them suckers around. So I went back, got it, and I was walking back up the hill and coming over kind of this next part of the ridge. And as I get up there, boom, big shot goes off. And so I can kind of see where they were, but couldn't really get proper view on them. So what I wanted to do is just quickly get on top of this ridge so I could see them, have sight on, see what they shot. And so start trekking my way up, probably start moving a bit faster than what I should have been. I got on top of the hill and I'm looking out over the hill, glassing over it to them, seeing them walk up the hill. Can't see any animals down as they kind of walk into the thick stuff. Now, I took a step, I think I took maybe 4 or 5 steps to the left just to try to get a better view of them. And literally as I did that, a mob of 6, so it was 5 hinds. Actually, I think there might have been 7. So it was 5 hinds. I'm pretty certain one was a yearling hind. And there was one stag who was definitely a cull stag who looked, and that was all I had my eyes on, the cull stag. That's why I'm a bit vague on what the others were. The cull stag literally looked at me, and he had 4 on one and he had literally the fork on the other, and so I was like, oh man, he's a shooter. But they looked at me, they ran off. I just fluffed up that whole situation. They pretty much ran down into this valley of the ridge I was on, so it's kind of like constant. If you think about like fingers running off of this ridge down to the bottom of the hill, which is where Clark and Rob were essentially, down in the bottom of the valley. But it's like, yeah, ridges running constantly down. So I'm walking along the mounds of these ridges, so they'd kind of run down into the hip or the base of one of these next ones. But then started making their way up. So I'm like, I'm going to make my way up hard. I'll go straight up to the top and try to get around the top of them and see what I can do. So I did that and pretty much ended up walking for a long time. I think I bumped them maybe once or twice more, just looking in the wrong locations. And you know what, to be honest, it wasn't really bumping. It was more like I would smell them, and I'm like, they're close, and then I just wouldn't really find them again. I definitely bumped them once more when I was walking hard up the hill. As I walked around for the rest of the time, I didn't actually really get eyes on properly. I could smell them. It was like strong wafts of red deer. And if you know, you know. And so pretty much I kept walking around, and it got to a point where I was like, you know what, they've definitely gone off the other way. They're probably below me, or they're probably getting back behind me and getting my wind now. And there's just no way that I'm going to get back onto that mob. So what I'll do is I'll just keep walking around the top of this hill. So I did that. I just kind of kept trekking through. It's great country. Like, it is incredible country, and it's thick as thick can be in some parts. Right where I was up on the top, it's pretty open. But there's kind of, as you're walking around, you can see the following ridges in some parts. And so I was just walking around through that, hoping to come across some more, and I literally get to pretty much close to the end, and like the end of the top of the hill where I'm about to dig my way back down in through the thick stuff to get to the very base where I'm going to meet up with Clark and Rob. And I'm standing at I'm walking along this ridge, and all of a sudden there is two hinds walking straight towards me. I'm like, fuck. So I quickly load my arrow. I draw back. I'm at full draw. And as she comes over the hill, she just stops and she's looking at me. I'm like, oh man, that's a perfect frontal shot. Like I would so happily take this shot. And she's looking at me like, no, I don't. Like, obviously aware, like I don't know what that is, but it's something. And this is I didn't actually range it, but it was sub 20. I reckon probably like 15 to 18 meters away. And so she is literally just looking at me, and I'm at full draw, and part of the property is that you have to have a two-way on at all times. And for some reason, my two-way just has like the biggest back. It's like, and then within like a second of that, Clark calls in, Matty, is that you, mate? I'm like, what the fuck? And they just took off. The deer just run. I remember just being like, of course that's the time it's going to happen. Anyway, we have a few back and forth, me and Clark, and it just turned out like the radios were just having a spack, and that went through the whole system. Pretty much he heard it, I heard it, and I don't know what it actually was, but it meant that the hinds ran off. I was like, do I or don't I shoot? I don't have full view onto these hinds as to if they're yearling hinds. The other thing you are allowed to shoot at this time of year is the dry hinds, and a lot of the time you can only tell that based on if you can see their sack or their udder. And to see a dry hind you pretty much just wouldn't see one at all, whereas with the hinds that were pregnant, you would see kind of like a droop or like a full udder essentially. And so to be honest, I wasn't going to take the shot. It was a drawback. A lot of the stuff on this weekend, I was like, I'm going to go through the full process of going through the hunt without actually doing the hunt, because it's just perfect practice. And so I drew back fully, had full views on. Could have taken a front vital shot if it had been an opportunity, but it obviously wasn't. So anyway, tracked down, met up with Clark and Rob, told them about the whole story, and it was happy days. We went back to camp. Had breakfast, and then I decided that I was going to go for a little lunchtime hunt. And the reason why I did this is because there's usually two deer there at camp. It's fawns so the mothers had been shot and they'd raised the fawns up. Now one of them had gone walkabouts. They think she's got a little boyfriend, and so she's been walking around with the others, maybe. But then there's a little stag, a little rooster stag, which they call Baby, and Baby. They actually neutered him because if he was to go through the process of having testosterone, he'd grow antlers and he'd be quite aggressive at times. So they've kept Baby as a pet deer essentially, and he's a bit of a nonsense. But I was just watching him. So as I had breakfast, and this is full daylight. This would be after 10 a.m. Just watching him, he hangs out in the shade for a little bit, then he hops up and moves around. Hangs out in the shade for a little bit, hops up and moves around. He's constantly eating. And I was like, you know what? That means that all the deer are going to be doing something similar. So I talked to Clark about just like the lay of the land. Pretty much just, I hadn't really hunted much close to the actual camp. And I said to him, hey mate, can I just jump down into here and go through some of these creek systems that kind of head down essentially the same big ridge that I was on. And he's like, yeah, man, go for it. So I jumped out. I went down into this little block, and literally I was 150 meters, 200 meters from camp. I literally walked out of the gate and walked down the hill. And I was looking in this little valley. I'm like, wow, this is like straight away into good deer country. And I knew like plenty of times there's been deer just at camp, or heard stories of deer being just around camp. And so I was like, you know what, I have to be aware kind of straight away. I'm looking at this little valley, and just start walking through. I'm in the shadows and just walking through very carefully. I'm like, you know what? This is like actually perfect deer country. I'm just going to have a bit of a look around. And I'm glassing in this bush, and I see a little ear flicker. I'm like, no way. And so looking at her, it was a little hind. She just bedded down in this thick bush, and it was literally midday. I'm like, there you go. That's what they're doing during the day, is literally just bedding themselves into thick stuff so they can see out. And she was overlooking the valley below us. It's just that she wasn't looking up at me. And so she's 50 meters away from me. I was like, okay, so if you were able to hunt this, what would you do? I'm like, how would you go about it? I'm like, well, really, where I'm standing from with her laying down could be an all right shot. However, if I had to get closer, what would I do? So I looked it out. I'm like, okay, so I'd walk back. I'd go down around this little like get out of her line of sight pretty much. Get into a little bit, like pretty much it was where I was very shady. There was a lot of open country down to where she was, and then she was in this thick bush. And she was kind of like in the valley, just trying to explain this properly, in the valley as the creek runs down, overlooking the rest of the creek. So I'm up on the hill of one of the sides of the creek, and she's kind of 50 meters in front of me down in the creek as it goes down further. So my plan was to walk back along the ridge, the hill that I was on, the side of the creek I was on, cross over the creek to get to the other side, because that's where the thicker parts of the bush was compared to where she was, and make my way across. And I was like, oh, that's a great game plan. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to see how close I can get to her. So took some footage of her and stuff, took some photos, and just posted up on Instagram. You might have seen like how many deer, or can you spot the deer in this photo? It was near impossible. Like the way that she was camouflaged in was crazy, with the shade and everything. So anyway, I made my way across and got to where she was. And I'm glassing this bush. I'm like, heck, there she is. So I was literally 5 minutes off of her as she's bedded. It's pretty much to a T. As I got there, she hopped up and she just started feeding down this little creek. I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep following her. So she probably got to like 20, 30 meters away from me, and she was just moseying her way down, and I just trekked down after her, just going nice and slowly. By this time, things had kind of started drying up, so it's crunchy as all buggery. It's just lucky that there was like cicadas going. It was middle of the day. There was enough noise for me to kind of make my way through, trekking in behind her without her really knowing, or never actually being, I don't think she was ever aware that I was there. And so pretty much got completely down, trekking along. So I'm on the left-hand side of the river. She's in the creek, and she's in the middle of the creek, pretty much making her way up onto both sides. So she'd just cross over, eat the food as she's going down this hill. And we get to this one point, and she starts to trek her way up. So I'm still on the left-hand side. She starts to trek her way up the right-hand side and going, like, cutting back over towards me. The way the wind is running is directly across. So eventually she's going to walk into my wind. So I'm like, you know what? If this is the game plan, if this is where I'd got to, this is where I'd take a shot. And so she was at 25 meters as she was coming out of these trees. I'm just taking some video footage of her, and I'm like, you know what, go through the full process. So I draw back, holding on her vitals, had full proper shot, and then I let down. And she walked along into my wind, and then eventually she just ran up off the hill. And it was just like this beautiful little moment to kind of go through and have that practice without there being any pressure, I guess, of taking the shot. I guess that's the best way to say it. Yeah, out there being any pressure of there being a shot having to be taken. So, as much as I was like, of course that's the way it's going to happen. So the hind that I don't think I can shoot, and at this time I hadn't really seen her udder properly, so I couldn't make a call as to if she was a dry hind. She was definitely not a yearling, but based on the fact she was by herself in some pretty thick country, my thoughts are that she was probably either there to drop her fawn, or she already had dropped her fawn. So pretty much it was just a beautiful little moment to kind of walk down beside this deer and just watch her in her natural elements as she's walking around and feeding. So yeah, that was like my midday hunt. So I got back up to camp and told them all about it, showed them some photos, and then game plan was for that afternoon to head out. So we went out to this lease country, which is just thick country, it's untouched country, pretty untouched country. And pretty much it was me, Clark, and a guy called Carl. And Carl has a rifle, and so pretty much Clark took us up into this country where he had just previously taken a video of a cull stag, and this was only posted in December. It was like the week before I went out, so early December, about a cull stag. And it looks just like a big grassy hill. However, we literally trekked into some of the thickest stuff. Like, it was like rain country, like rainforest country. Like, it was thick stuff, and we were literally burying ourselves as we were walking through this stuff. And we get up to the top of this hill, and he's like, look, this is the little valley where I've seen them a lot. And he was trying to explain it to me before we even got up there. But I don't think there was any way that I was going to get a bow shot on to any deer when we were there. And we got there, and we're literally trekking through this thick stuff, like crunching our way up to the top of this hill. And all of a sudden, this young stag and the hind run out, and they run straight up the hill, like kind of across from us. And Clark's like, all right, get ready. So Carl's quickly put his gun to his shoulder. He's like, not on your shoulder, not on your shoulder. Like Clark is very for making sure it's always an ethical shot. So get across, get yourself stable. Make sure you get and I think this is the biggest thing. You've always got time when you've got a rifle. Like you've got that time to take the shot. I mean, you've got the time always, and making sure that you're shooting the right thing is really important when you're in this block. And so pretty much he's like, the shot opportunity was not actually, I think he actually probably could have taken the shot, but at the same time, the shot was not good because the stag was not a cull stag. It was actually a pretty young stag that had all 3 tines on both sides, so he was free to roll. So we're just kind of looking over this valley for a bit, and then we decided it's probably best, and the winds were horrible. The winds were horrible, and we decided that it was best if we kind of got over to the next valley and had a look down and had pretty much set up for the same thing. And as we were walking through all this thick stuff, we're finding all these little bedding areas, and it's literally like if a deer were to be laying down there, you would not see them whatsoever. Like unless you had a complete hawk eye over the top of them, you're like an eagle's eye sort of thing, you would not see these deer at all. And so Clark had said multiple times, like, you never see the big boys unless you're in stuff like this. Like, this is why the big boys become big boys, because they know to hide out into this thick stuff where they can hear everything and anything coming if it's coming their way. And so it was crazy to see how thick it actually was. And we're up in these like this thick hillside, and there's like, we come up to these big trees, and there's big boar rubs as well. I'm like, yes, like I was getting really excited because it obviously is like these boar rubs. They went I don't know, like, let me think about it. My knee probably sits maybe like, what's that, 50, 60, maybe like 60 or 70 centimeters up off of the ground, and there was boar rubs like higher than my knee. I was like, wow, that is impressive to see what they actually, like where they were and what they were. But anyway, we kind of kept trekking through all this thick stuff, and pretty much we just didn't come across anything. And so we get out of the thick stuff, and we start making our way back towards the car, and there was another hunter that was meeting up with us at that point. So we radioed him, he came and met up with us, or we're walking along. We just kind of kept slowly stopping and checking things out as we're walking back, because it's just about to be sundown, which is obviously a time when a lot of the deer come out and about. And so we're walking back, and he literally starts meowing at us and comes up on us. And so he'd caught up, and we're probably, when he caught up, I reckon we're 500 metres from the car, and we start walking back to the car. We probably get maybe 300, 400 metres from the car, and Clark stops us all, and we quickly jump down the ground. And at first I hadn't seen it because of the way that the tree was laying. So I was blocked by the tree, but I took a step back, and sure enough, there was this young stag, and there was actually 2 stags. I never saw the second stag, but the 2 stags just standing in the field on our left. And so we quickly kind of got down. We moved our way around so you could have full eyes on. And these stags just bedded down. Like, I'm talking 10 minutes before the sun's about to go down, maybe 20 minutes before the sun's about to go down. They bed themselves down. They're laying in this thick grass where you can barely even see them, which was fascinating to me. I kind of thought it's feeding time. It's time for them to be up and about. There's no way that they would still be bedded. But something I forgot to mention actually is that there was a guy that had rocked up with his twin sons that afternoon, and they were going to shoot the 22. But when they went to shoot the 22, the trigger was being dodgy, so they ended up getting out the 308 and letting some shots off. Now, even though we're a fair few K away as the crow flies, it was still loud as loud can be from the rifle shots going off. So there was, I think, like 6 shots went off. Boom, boom. And that can be obviously enough to maybe make things lay low for a little bit longer. So whether that was it or not, I'm not sure. But anyway, we came across him. I, like I said, never got eyes on the second guy to start with until after the shot was taken. But Clark had said, pretty much he said, look, it's too late for the bow. I'm sorry, mate, you don't have time to make a play. So this is on Carl. Also, Robert had a shot earlier and missed. So therefore, it was on Carl to take his shot. And so pretty much we lined it up so Carl could take his shot, and he's like, look, this one at the back is a cull stag, make sure you shoot it. And pretty much the way he lined it up was like, hey, shoot it through the eye if you can. And sure enough, Carl took the shot, and it was straight through the eye. Anyway, he took the shot. Deer was down. We started walking over towards it, and the other guys actually didn't see it, but the other stag, or me and Rob saw it, but the stag had run over to pretty much as far as he could, but still looking back at us. And just the way that the sun was going down pretty much behind him, it was just like, it was so majestic, it was so cool. He's just hanging out with his big old antlers, just velvet antlers just hanging out, and it was just cool. I was watching us as we walked across the field and pretty much didn't do anything. He just watched us for ages and then eventually just moseyed his way off. Anyway, so we walked up, got the car, drove down, got the deer, got it up, got it skinned, and yeah, that was that night. And so very eventful. We got back and the kids were super pumped. The twin boys. It was pretty awesome to kind of see that experience. And something that I really like about this whole program is that it's really like a family orientated place where you can take your kids, take your family for a camping weekend, and they get to kind of witness and experience all of that. And so it was cool to kind of see them enjoying that. So yeah, leads us to the last morning hunt. So pretty much I went back to the space where I was going, where Rob and Clark had gone down the bottom, where I'd bumped the cull stag. And so I was driving to there, and as I was driving there, I literally saw this cull stag just sitting on the side of the hill. I'm like, wow, there you go. So I'm driving up the hill. He's looking directly at me. I kind of probably slowed down a little bit too much, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive over this hill, stop, and then make my way back down towards him, see what I can do. He'd already started to kind of make his way around the hill, but I thought I'd get far enough away and be able to make my way back towards him, and it just didn't work out. Pretty much I went down looking for him, never saw him again. But if it was one of those situations that if I had a rifle, it would have literally been stop, pull out the door, like pull out the gun, go off the side of the car door, and probably would have been a deer down. It wasn't the case. So I pretty much got across to where I was hunting, started at the block and started walking my whole way around. Winds were perfect to be able to do that, so I just started trekking. The plan was to stay high to start with, and hopefully just come across that mob that I'd seen the day before. So I started making my way around, and it was a pretty quiet morning. There really wasn't much about. But as I was walking, I was looking across at one of the ridges, as I was like, it's the ridges that I'm about to get to, and sure enough, I see the stag. And I'm like, yes. So he's feeding on the face, just kind of making his way around. And I'm like, okay, so that's 3 ridges around, and this is where Avenza, the map system they use, comes into a lot of play. It meant that I could drop a pin on where I thought he was, make my way over to that pin, and then I could start to really kind of hunt from there. But really, given that it was 3 ridges away, I was going to go slow anyway. But it's just good having a system like that where you can pretty much use your maps and your GPS to actually see where you are and utilize a system like that. It's not just a complete guess game when you get there. And so I made my way around, started trekking over, and there was no sign between me and him. So I got to where he was and pretty much put myself directly right where he was. I'm like, okay, so I think he's gone this way. So I started making my way around, like from where I'd last seen him, that was the way he's headed. So I kept going around that direction, and I get to this point where he is, or where I think he should be. I'm like, he's got to be here. Like, where is he? I'm like, unless he's winded me or seen me or something, like there's no reason for him to run off. He's got to be here. I'm constantly looking down the hill. And I turned around and he's right there. I was like, no way. Like, he's literally right there. He was, I think, 35 meters at that point, so I got closer. I took some footage of him, which you may have seen on my story. Just a beautiful stag. And it turns out he's actually a bit of an old boy based on his jawline. You could tell that. And so, yeah, it was super cool to kind of be that close. And something Clark had said to us that usually if you find one, there's going to be another one with him. So I stayed around him for a good 15 minutes, just staying 30 meters off him the whole time. Hoping that another one would rock up, and there was just nothing there. So I just, my wife's trying to give me a note. Yeah, and so pretty much he was right there, hanging off him for 15 minutes, just waiting for something else to come out, and unfortunately, there was nothing that was with him. So it's one of those situations where, once again, I actually went through the full shot process again, drew back, made sure I could take my shot at him, and it would have been the situation of another deer down. But it wasn't the case. It wasn't the way it was meant to be. So I made my way back, and actually that morning I slogged it. I went hard. So given that it was my last morning, I was like feeling the pressure of time, so pretty much I trekked along the rest of the, that was not even halfway through the mountain sort of thing. So I made my way across the rest of the mountain, or across the top of the mountain, got to the top, and I was like, okay, well I didn't see anything, so I'm going to go through the middle of the mountain. So I got my way halfway down and started trekking my way through. Pretty much the country was just so thick and so steep that I had to make my way all the way down to the bottom and then find another way up. and I made my way back up eventually. And I think it was like a 6 or 7 hour hunt, kind of out and about. I think it was 5 till 11:30, something like that. That was out for. So it was even earlier, 4:30 till 11:30, something like that. So yeah, it was a big trek. Anyway, got back to camp and fed up and pretty much had to make a move on. Had to get back to home. So that was that weekend hunt. So it's one of those situations where I'm really pleased and I'm really pumped with how far I've come as a hunter. I'm really excited with the opportunities I've given myself. And it just fills me with a lot of confidence with the hunts that I'm going to go on for 2022, I think, with what I know is possible and what I'm starting to achieve. So I think there's some huge things coming. Fingers across and head is high for 2022. And I look forward to sharing those stories and sharing more hunts with you. So yeah, thank you guys for listening. As always, thank you for your ongoing support. I really do appreciate it. If you guys have any recommendations around people that you'd love to hear on the podcast, then I'm all ears. I'm always looking for people. And yeah, I look forward to bringing you more content around not only my own personal hunts, but also from other hunters, interviewing more people throughout the year. So thanks again for joining me. And once again, if you would like to get involved with the Bowhunters Challenge, January is the time to do it. Obviously, start of the new year, good chance to kind of get involved. But you can do that and get $300 off at the moment, making the total price only $450 for that 12-week program. And believe me, that is like value packed. I really like... I don't know. I'm not going to go too deep into it, apart from the fact that if you are looking for something to really kind of get yourself in gear, something that's directed to you as a bow hunter in particular, to something that's going to help you out with bow hunting and not only bow hunting, but your health in general, but bow hunting in particular, like getting stronger with upper body, getting more stamina in the lower body, then it's a really great program. You can get $300 off through the month of January with the code JAN2022. Thanks heaps, team. I hope you're doing well. Hope you're getting out hunting. Much love from my family to yours.
That wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for joining us, team. If you did have any topics, questions, or you wanted to suggest a guest for Becoming a Bowhunter, you can send me an email at matty@becomingabowhunter.com. If you are enjoying the show or you've enjoyed in particular episodes, please do me a solid and share it around with your friends. If you are not already, please hit the subscribe button, as the more subscribers we get, the higher the podcast gets ranked, and that definitely helps out for showing it to other individuals. If you are not already following me on Instagram, it's at becomingabowhunter.podcast, and on YouTube, it's Becoming a Bowhunter. Get out, team, fling some arrows, get that practice in, and walk those yards in the paddocks until you find those critters. That is it for now, but not the last time that you'll hear from Becoming a Bowhunter.